My name is Chloe. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be a celebration. It was held in the private room of an expensive restaurant, the kind with linen tablecloths and candles that flickered just right. I had picked the place. I had paid the deposit. I stood by the door, watching my brother Ethan laugh with his friends. His bride-to-be, Olivia, was holding court at the center of the room. Her voice a little too loud. Her laugh a little too sharp. She saw me watching and her smile tightened. She excused herself from her circle of bridesmaids and walked toward me, her heels clicking on the polished floor. The sound was like a countdown. "Chloe," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. She stopped right in front of me, close enough that I could smell her perfume. It was heavy and floral, the kind that gives you a headache. "I'm so glad you're here." I knew it was a lie. "It looks beautiful, Olivia." Everything came together. Her eyes scanned the room, then landed back on me, cold and assessing. It did. And for the big day, we want everything to be perfect. The photos, the atmosphere. You know. She gestured vaguely with a manicured hand. The bridesmaids were watching now. A small pack of hyenas waiting for the signal to laugh. "Of course," I said, my stomach twisting. I knew where this was going. "It's just that you don't really fit the vibe we're going for," she said, the sweetness gone, replaced by a blunt cruelty. "You're a little plain. We want vibrant, happy people in the pictures. It would be better if you just didn't come tomorrow." The words hit me like a slap. I looked past her to Ethan. He was standing with his groomsmen, his back to us. But I saw his shoulders tense. He heard her. He had to have heard her. He didn't turn around. He just took a sip of his champagne and laughed at something one of his friends said. The bridesmaids giggled. A low, nasty sound. Humiliation washed over me, hot and sickening. I had planned this party. I had paid for her dress. I was funding the entire wedding. She was so worried about me ruining with my plain presence. I looked at Olivia's smug face, at the smirking bridesmaids, at my brother's rigid back. And in that moment, something inside me didn't break. It clicked into place. A cold, hard clarity I hadn't felt in years. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just gave her a small, tight smile. "I understand," I said softly. I turned and walked out of the restaurant. The warm, noisy chatter faded behind me, replaced by the cool night air. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness. It was anger. A clean, purifying anger. I sat in my car, the engine off, and stared at the restaurant's glowing sign. For years, I had tried to buy my way into my own family. I had paid for their approval, for a seat at their table, and they had just told me I wasn't welcome. Fine. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over my contacts. Then I pressed the first name on my list. The phone rang once. Twice. He picked up. "Hello? It's me," I said, my voice steady. "Cancel everything." Growing up in our house was like living in a story that wasn't about you. Ethan was the hero, the main character. I was the supporting cast, the one who handed him things he needed before he knew he needed them. Ethan was the son, and my parents, and by extension, were just planets orbiting him. Our paths dictated by his gravity. He was the golden child. I was just the other one, the reliable one. It started small. When we were kids, if a vase broke, it was my fault for leaving it on the table, not Ethan's for throwing a ball in the house. My straight-A report cards were met with a nod and a, "That's nice." Honey, before being placed on the fridge under a drawing Ethan did, that was mostly just a brown smear. His participation trophy for soccer got a custom-built shelf in the living room. My first-place science fair medal was somewhere in the kitchen drawer. My parents didn't mean to be cruel. They just saw what they wanted to see. They saw a son who needed encouragement, who needed to be told he was special at every turn. In me, they saw a daughter who was self-sufficient. I didn't need the praise, the attention, the extra help. I was the responsible one. Chloe will figure it out. Chloe can handle it. It became my identity, a role I was cast in without ever auditioning. And for years, I played the part. I figured things out. I handled it. When Ethan wanted a car at 16, he got a brand new convertible. My parents co-signed the loan, telling him it was a reward for trying so hard in school, even though his grades were mediocre at best. When I turned 16, I was given the bus schedule and told a part-time job would build character. So, I got a job. I saved my money. I bought my own 10-year-old sedan. And I paid for my own insurance. My parents praised me for my independence, never realizing they had forced it on me. They saw it as a virtue, a strength. I saw it as a wall they had built between us, brick by invisible brick. This pattern continued into adulthood. Ethan drifted through college, changing his major 3 times, while my parents funded his extended stay. I worked 2 jobs to get through community college before transferring to a state school, taking out loans and graduating with honors and a mountain of debt. Ethan got a marketing job at a friend's company after graduation, which mostly involved long lunches and a generous expense account. I started my own small consulting firm, working 80-hour weeks from my tiny apartment, building something from nothing. Slowly, I became successful, really successful. But in my family's eyes, I was still just the backdrop to Ethan's life. My success wasn't a cause for celebration. It was a resource. When Ethan's rent was late, my mom would call, "Honey, you know your brother is still finding his feet. Could you help him out this month?" When my parents needed a new roof, they didn't ask for a loan. They just assumed I would pay for it. "You're doing so well, Chloe. It's a drop in the bucket for you." And I did it every single time. I wrote the checks. I made the transfers. I paid for the plane tickets, the car repairs, the credit card bills. Each payment was a quiet plea. See me. Value me. Let me in. So, when Ethan announced he was marrying Olivia, I saw the ultimate opportunity. This wasn't just a wedding. It was my masterpiece. My grand gesture. This was my chance to finally, undeniably, earn my place. I remember the night he told us. We were at my parents' house for dinner. Ethan and Olivia sat side by side, glowing. We want a big wedding, Olivia announced, flashing her ridiculously large diamond ring. Something memorable. My father clapped Ethan on the back. My mother was already tearing up. Oh, my boy is getting married. Then came the inevitable talk about money. My dad coughed. Well, you know, things are a bit tight. My mom wrung her hands. We'll help however we can. Of course, but a big wedding. Ethan looked deflated. Olivia's smile faltered. And I saw my opening. The words came out of my mouth before I even had a chance to think them through. I'll pay for it, I said. The room went silent. All eyes turned to me. For a moment, I felt like the main character. Chloe, you don't have to do that, my mother said, though her eyes were shining with relief. I wanted 24. I insisted. It's my gift to you both. Ethan's face broke into a wide grin. Chloe, are you serious? He rushed over and gave me a rare hug. It felt stiff, unfamiliar. You're the best sister ever. Olivia was already pulling out her phone, scrolling through pictures of venues. I've always dreamed of getting married at the Crestview, she mused, naming the most expensive country club in the state. And so it began. For the next 6 months, I became a full-time wedding planner on top of running my own company. I wasn't just the bank. I was the labor. I was the one on the phone with vendors, negotiating contracts, tasting cakes, and reviewing floral arrangements. I spent hours creating spreadsheets, tracking payments, and managing the guest list. Olivia would send me blurry photos from Pinterest with demanding texts. Find this exact shade of blush for the napkins. Or, the band has to be able to play this song. Make it happen. I did it all. I made it all happen. I convinced the caterer to add a vegan option at the last minute for one of her friends. I found a photographer who matched her light and airy aesthetic. I booked the 10-piece band. I paid the non-refundable deposit on the Crestview. Every invoice I paid, every detail I arranged, was a down payment on my own belonging. I imagined myself at the wedding, standing beside Ethan not as the maid of honor, a role Olivia had given to her best friend from college without a second thought, watching them say their vows. I imagined my parents looking at me with pride. Real pride. For the first time. I pictured the toasts where someone would finally acknowledge my contribution, my generosity, my love. I was so focused on the fantasy, on this perfect image of acceptance I was building, that I didn't see the reality. I didn't see that I wasn't building a bridge into my family. I was just building a beautiful stage for them to perform on a stage where I wasn't even allowed to stand. I was funding my own disappearance, writing checks to pay for my own exclusion. But I wouldn't realize that until it was far, far too late. The first signs were small, like tiny cracks in a foundation. I was so busy managing the architecture of the wedding that I almost missed them. It started with the group chats. Olivia created one for her bridesmaids called Bride Tribe, filled with pictures of dresses and plans for the bachelorette party in Miami, a trip I wasn't invited to. But my credit card was funding through a loan to Ethan for the plane tickets. There was another chat for the family, but my notifications seemed to go quiet. I'd see my mom and Ethan in person, and they'd be laughing about a joke from the chat that I'd never seen. When I'd ask, my mom would wave her hand dismissively. Oh, it was nothing. Just silly family stuff. The real chills started about a month before the wedding. I had a meeting scheduled with the florist to finalize the centerpieces. When I arrived, the florist, a woman named Sophie, whom I'd built a good rapport with, looked flustered. "Chloe." "Hi," she said, avoiding my eyes. "Olivia was just here." "Oh, I didn't know she was coming." "We were supposed to meet together," I said, trying to keep my tone light. Sophie fidgeted with a vase. She, made some changes. She also said that she's the primary contact now. All emails and calls should go directly to her. She handed me a revised contract. My name was still listed as the payer, but the contact person had been changed to Olivia. My email and phone number were crossed out. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I see. And she didn't think to mention this to me. She said she wanted to take the burden off you, Sophie said, her expression making it clear she didn't believe it for a second. I walked out of the flower shop feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. I called Ethan immediately. He didn't pick up. Instead, a few minutes later, a text message appeared on my screen. "Hey, Olivia told me you went to the florist. She's just trying to handle things so you don't have to. She's the bride. Let her have her way on this." I typed back, my thumbs shaking slightly. She changed the contact information. Ethan. She's cutting me out of the planning I'm doing and paying for. The reply came back almost instantly, and it was colder than I could have imagined. "Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. It's her day. Just be supportive. Don't make this harder." The words echoed in my head. I wasn't a sister. I was a complication. I wasn't a benefactor. I was an obstacle. My support was expected to be silent and financial. I was supposed to write the checks, then disappear. I tried to talk to my parents that weekend. I went over for Sunday dinner, hoping for an audience, for someone to see how wrong this was. I found them in the kitchen addressing wedding invitations. My mother was writing out the names in her neat cursive, and my father was stamping them. Mom, Dad, can I talk to you for a second? I started, leaning against the counter. Of course, sweetie, my mom said, not looking up from her list. Look at this beautiful invitation. You really picked the best cardstock. It's about the wedding, I said, my voice tight. Olivia is no. She's actively cutting me out. She changed the vendor contacts. She's making decisions without me, even though I'm the one who has to approve the payments. My father sealed an envelope with a decisive thump. She's a young bride. Chloe. They get a little crazy. It's normal. It's not normal to treat the person paying for everything like an inconvenience, I argued, my voice rising. She's being rude and dismissive, and Ethan is letting her. My mother finally put her pen down and looked at me. Her expression wasn't one of sympathy. It was one of tired exasperation. Chloe, just be the bigger person. You know how your brother is. He avoids conflict. And this is the most important day of his life. He needs this. He needs this to be perfect. Don't make waves. So, I'm supposed to just let them walk all over me? I asked, my voice cracking. I'm paying for every single one of these invitations you're sending out. Don't I get a say? Don't I deserve some respect? It's not about respect. It's about family, my dad said sternly. And family supports each other. Ethan needs this more than you need to be right. Just let it go. Let it go. Be the bigger person. Don't make waves. It was the same script they had used my entire life. My feelings were always secondary to Ethan's needs. My boundaries were inconveniences to his happiness. I was asking for the bare minimum. Common decency. And they were telling me it was too much to ask for. They weren't just dismissing my pain. They were invalidating it. They were telling me I had no right to feel hurt. I looked at the piles of expensive envelopes, at the elegant script spelling out the names of hundreds of people who would come to celebrate a union I was bankrolling but wasn't truly a part of. And I felt a profound sense of loneliness, the kind that's colder and sharper than any physical pain. I was in my childhood home, surrounded by my family, and I had never felt more like a stranger. The betrayal wasn't just Olivia's sneering or Ethan's cowardly texts. It was the quiet, steady erosion of my worth by the two people who were supposed to have built me up. They had handed Ethan a crown his whole life, and they had handed me a shovel and told me to dig the moat around his castle. And now that I was standing in the trench covered in dirt, they wouldn't even throw me a rope. They just told me to keep digging. I drove home that night with a hollow feeling in my chest. The texts from Olivia became more brazen. She'd send me photos of her and her bridesmaids at a dress fitting for a designer gown, a gown I'd paid for, with the caption, "Having so much fun, wish you were here." A mocking, Cruel twist of the knife. I knew she was showing her friends the texts, laughing at the invisible sister who paid for everything. I was the family joke, the walking ATM. And the worst part was, I had let them do it. I had handed them the tools to erase me, $1 at a time. The breaking point didn't come with a shout or a slammed door. It arrived silently, in the middle of the night, in the sterile quiet of my home office. It was 2 weeks before the wedding, and I couldn't sleep. I'd been staring at the ceiling for hours, the dismissive words of my parents and Ethan's cold texts playing on a loop in my head. Don't make this harder. Be the bigger person. Ethan needs this more than you. I finally gave up on sleep, got out of bed, and walked to my office. My laptop was open, still displaying the master spreadsheet I'd created for the wedding. It had columns for everything: vendor names, contact info, deposit amounts, final payment due dates. It was a monument to my effort, my generosity. I clicked open a folder on my desktop labeled Wedding Receipts. Inside were dozens of scanned invoices and credit card statements. There was the $20,000 non-refundable deposit for the Crestview, the $8,000 for the photographer, the $12,000 for the caterer who was serving filet mignon to 150 guests, the $5,000 for the flowers, peonies, and garden roses flown in from Holland because Olivia saw them on a blog, the band, the lighting, the string quartet for the ceremony, the custom-printed napkins, the 5-tier cake. I started adding it all up. My fingers flew across the keyboard of my calculator. A numb, mechanical motion. The numbers climbed higher and higher. I wasn't just looking at money anymore. I was looking at a quantifiable measure of my own foolishness. Each receipt was a piece of evidence in the case against myself. Each line item was a testament to how desperately I had tried to buy something that was never for sale, a place in my own family. The total stared back at me from the screen, blinking like a warning light. Over $75,000. And that was just what I'd paid so far. My breath hitched. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking in the silence. I had bankrolled my own exclusion. That was the simple, brutal truth of it. Every beautiful detail of this perfect wedding was a product of my hard work. The string lights that would twinkle over the dance floor, I had picked them out and paid for them. The delicate flowers Olivia would hold in her bouquet, I had negotiated the price and wired the money. The very plates of food their guests would eat, they were courtesy of my bank account. I had built this entire fantasy for them, piece by expensive piece. And my reward was to be told that my presence would ruin the aesthetic. I was good enough to pay the bills, but not good enough to be in the photographs. A memory surfaced. Unbidden. I was 10 years old, and I'd spent a month saving my allowance to buy my mom a birthday present. It was a small silver locket. I'd wrapped it myself in clumsy paper and presented it to her with a proud smile. She opened it, looked at it for a second, and said, "Oh, that's nice, honey." Then Ethan came in with a picture he'd drawn of the two of them, and she'd burst into tears of joy, hugging him tightly. The locket was put in a drawer. The drawing was framed and hung on the wall, It was the same feeling now, magnified 1,000 times. My offering, no matter how great, would always be invisible next to Ethan's mere existence. My value was functional. I was the fixer, the provider, the silent benefactor. I was the foundation of the house, essential but unseen, buried underground. Ethan was the picture window, displaying the happy family to the world. I looked around my office, at the awards on my wall from the business chamber, at the photos of a life I had built for myself from scratch. With no help from anyone, I had created a successful company. I had employees who depended on me, clients who respected me. I was competent, strong, and independent. So why did I shrink into that 10-year-old girl the moment my family was involved? Why was I still trying to buy that locket out of the drawer? Because I was scared. Scared of the finality of letting go. Scared of admitting that the family I craved didn't actually exist. I had been pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom, hoping that if I just poured faster, it would eventually fill up. But sitting there in the blue glow of the monitor, I finally saw the hole. And I realized it wasn't my job to fill it. It was my job to stop pouring. The decision settled over me, not with rage, but with a profound, chilling calm. The anger from the rehearsal dinner had been a spark. This was the ice forming around it. It was a cold, hard, logical conclusion. They had drawn a line. They had placed me on the outside. All I had to do was accept it. If I don't belong, then neither does my money. The thought was so simple, so liberating. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishment. It was about boundaries. It was about self-preservation. It was about finally, after 30 years of playing a role I never wanted, walking off the stage. I pulled the contracts out of their folder one by one. I had been the one to sign them. My name, my company's name, was on every single document. Olivia and Ethan hadn't signed anything. They hadn't put a single dollar down. They had no legal standing. They had just reaped the benefits. My humiliation turned into something else. It turned into power. The power they had unknowingly left in my hands. The power of the pen. The power of the purse. They saw me as a doormat. But they'd forgotten that the doormat was the one who owned the house. I didn't go back to bed. I stayed up until the sun rose, going through every contract, every email, highlighting cancellation clauses and payment terms. I was no longer a hurt sister. I was a businesswoman evaluating a series of very, very bad investments. And it was time to cut my losses. The next morning, I walked into my office with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. My employees greeted me. And for the first time in months, I wasn't distracted by a text from Olivia or a pending wedding invoice. My mind was clear, focused. I called my business partner and best friend, Mark, into my office and closed the door. Mark had been my rock since we'd started the firm together 5 years ago. He was sharp, pragmatic, and had a very low tolerance for nonsense, especially when it came to my family. He'd watched me bend over backwards for them for years. His disapproval, a silent but constant presence. "What's up?" he asked, plopping into the chair opposite my desk. "You look different. You finally get some sleep." "Better?" I said. I pushed a thick folder across the desk. "I need you to look at these. As my business partner, and as my friend." He picked up the folder and began to read. It contained every contract, every payment confirmation, every piece of paper related to the wedding. He was silent for a long time. His brow furrowed as he scanned the documents. He'd occasionally let out a low whistle or shake his head in disbelief. I just sat there waiting, sipping my coffee. I wasn't looking for his permission, but I knew I needed his perspective. My emotions were still raw, and I needed the clear, a logical lens he always provided. Finally, he looked up from the last page, his expression a mixture of fury and something that looked like relief. $75 grand, he said, his voice flat. "And that's before the final payments. You were on track to break $100,000 for a party you were just uninvited from." I told him about the rehearsal dinner on the drive into work. He'd listened without interruption, a muscle in his jaw tightening with every word I said. "That's the summary of it." "Yes," I replied calmly. "Chloe," he said, leaning forward and folding his hands on the desk. "I've wanted to say something for months, but I knew you wouldn't listen. You were trying to do something noble, in your own way. But this," he tapped the folder, "this is not family. This is an abusive financial relationship. They're not just taking you for granted. They're exploiting you." "I know," I said. "I think I've known for a long time. I just didn't want to admit it." "So, what are you going to do?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. "That's why I wanted you to see the contracts," I explained. "I signed everything. My name, my business address as the billing contact. Ethan and Olivia aren't on a single one of these." Mark's eyes lit up with understanding. A slow, grim smile spread across his face. "Oh, you beautiful, brilliant woman," he said. "You did it all by the book. You hold all the cards." He started flipping through the pages again, this time with a lawyer's precision. "Look at this. The cancellation clause for the venue. You lose the deposit, but you're not liable for the remaining balance if you cancel more than 10 days out. We're at 12 days. The caterer is the same. The band. The photographer. They all have similar clauses. You structured these deals perfectly to protect yourself." It was true. My business instincts had kicked in automatically during the planning process. I always read the fine print. I always negotiated for favorable terms. I had built a safety net for a fall I never consciously thought I would take. While my heart was trying to buy its way in, my head was quietly preparing an exit strategy. "You'll lose the deposits," Mark continued, calculating in his head. Maybe $30,000 all told. But you'll save yourself another 60 or 70, and more importantly, you'll save your sanity. He looked me straight in the eye. They can't have your money and erase you. 2. It doesn't work that way. They think they can because you've always let them. They've mistaken your kindness for weakness. They have no idea who they're dealing with. Hearing him say it, confirming what I had concluded in the dark of my office, solidified my resolve. He was right. I wasn't the meek, overlooked sister anymore. I was Chloe Bennett, the woman who built a company from the ground up. I was a negotiator, a strategist. I had been applying those skills to everyone else's benefit for years. It was time to apply them to my own. They're going to freak out, Mark warned, though he was grinning. Your brother, his fiancé, your parents. They're going to come at you with everything they have. Guilt, anger, manipulation. You have to be ready for that. I'm ready, I said, and the words felt truer than anything I'd said in a long time. I'm not angry anymore. Mark, I'm just done. He nodded slowly. Good. Because what you do next isn't about revenge. It's a business decision. You're terminating a series of contracts with partners who have breached the terms of your unspoken agreement. The agreement was that you provide the funds and they provide you with a place in the family. They broke the deal first. He leaned back, a look of profound respect on his face. They wanted a perfect, vibrant wedding. They're about to find out that the most vibrant thing about it was your bank account. We spent the next hour drafting emails. The language was polite, professional, and utterly non-negotiable. To each vendor, I wrote a simple, clear message informing them of my decision to cancel the services for the Bennett-Hayes wedding on the specified date. I cited the cancellation clause in our contract and confirmed that I understood the deposit would be forfeited. I asked them to send a final, zero-balance invoice for my records. I hit send on the first one, to the venue. A weight I didn't even know I was carrying lifted off my shoulders. I sent the next to the caterer, then the florist, the photographer, the band. With each click, I felt lighter. I was severing ties, not with the vendors, but with the hope that had kept me hostage for so long. The hope that one day my family would see me. They were about to see me. All right. Just not in the way they ever expected. The first 24 hours were quiet. It was the eerie calm before a storm. And I spent it shoring up my defenses. I blocked Olivia on my phone and social media. I didn't block Ethan or my parents yet. I knew they would be the primary channels of the incoming chaos, and I needed to be able to monitor it. I forwarded the cancellation confirmations from the vendors to a separate folder in my email, creating a tidy, irrefutable paper trail. The first tremor hit on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 days after the rehearsal dinner. It was a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A message popped up a moment later. It was the wedding photographer. Hi. Chloe. His voice was hesitant and confused. I, just got a very strange call from a woman named Olivia Hayes. She was trying to confirm the schedule for Saturday, and I told her the event had been canceled per your instructions. She seemed to think it was a mistake. A very angry mistake. Can you give me a call back to clarify? As far as I'm concerned, the contract is terminated. I smiled. The first domino had fallen. An hour later, an email landed in my inbox from the caterer. The subject line was, "Urgent, regarding your cancellation." Dear Chloe. It read, I am writing to follow up on your cancellation email. I have just been on the phone with Olivia Hayes, who was extremely irate and insisted the wedding is still happening. She demanded I reinstate the service. But I informed her that you are the sole signatory on the contract and that only you can make changes. She was not pleased. Please advise if there has been any change to your decision. Otherwise, we will proceed with the cancellation as requested. The emails and calls kept coming. The florist, the band leader, the rental company for the tables and chairs. Each one told the same story. Olivia. Arrogant and demanding. Trying to take control of contracts she had no authority over. Only to be stonewalled by professionals who honored the signature on the dotted line. They had all called me, the person who paid the bills, for the final word. And my word was final. All decisions go through me. I told each of them, and my decision stands. The event is canceled. By Tuesday evening, the panic reached my family. The first text from Ethan was just one word. Call me. I ignored it. I was in my kitchen cooking myself a proper meal for the first time in weeks, enjoying the simple act of doing something for myself. A few minutes later, another text. The venue just called. They said you canceled the wedding. Is this a joke? I continued chopping vegetables. Then a barrage of them, one after another. His desperation growing with each message. Chloe. What the hell is going on? Olivia is freaking out. She says you're ruining everything. This isn't funny. Call me back right now. You can't do this. It's my wedding. His wedding. It was always his wedding. Her day. It was never our family celebration. He was confirming everything I had finally realized. Then Olivia, having found a way around my block by texting from a friend's phone, sent her own venomous message. Her tone had shifted dramatically from the smug superiority at the rehearsal dinner. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a frantic, shrieking rage that was palpable even through the screen. You selfish bee. You are trying to destroy my perfect day out of jealousy. You were always jealous of me and Ethan. Well, it won't work. You will call them back and fix this right now. I took a screenshot of her message and saved it. More evidence. Finally, the call I was dreading and expecting came from my mother. I let it ring, then listened to the voicemail. Her voice was trembling. A classic manipulation tactic. Chloe. Honey, I don't know what's going on, but Ethan is hysterical. Olivia is crying her eyes out. They said you canceled the venue. There must be some misunderstanding. Please. Please call me back. You're scaring us. I felt a pang of the old guilt. The familiar urge to smooth things over. To be the bigger person. But then I remembered her face when she told me to let it go. Her complete dismissal of my pain. This wasn't about a misunderstanding. This was about a long overdue consequence. I spent the rest of the night in silence. I ate my dinner, watched a movie, and went to bed early. I slept more soundly than I had in 6 months. The next day, the pressure escalated. My father left a voicemail that was far from my mother's tearful plea. It was cold and threatening. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, Chloe, but it stops now. You will reinstate every one of those contracts, or you will regret it. This family is done with your drama. My drama? My entire life. I had avoided drama, swallowed my feelings, and kept the peace. The one time I stood up for myself, I was the dramatic one. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. The climax of their panic campaign came on Wednesday night. A series of texts from Ethan, each one more pathetic than the last. They started angry, then moved to pleading, and finally landed on a weak attempt at an apology that was really just another form of blame. Okay, I get it. You're mad. Olivia shouldn't have said what she said. She was just stressed. But canceling the whole wedding? Isn't that a bit of an overreaction? All our friends and family are flying in. What are we supposed to tell them? Chloe, please. I'm sorry. Okay? I'm sorry you're upset. Now can you please just fix this? I can't afford to pay for all this myself. You know that. There it was. The truth. I can't afford it. You know that. It was never about me, my feelings, or my presence. It was only ever about my money. He wasn't sorry for hurting me. He was sorry that his ATM was out of service. I read his last text and felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just a quiet, empty finality. If this story is touching you, or you've ever felt this way, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing this video. It truly helps me grow and create more stories like this. The last thread of hope. The tiny, lingering idea that maybe my brother did love me underneath it all. Finally snapped. He had shown me exactly who he was. I owed it to myself to believe him. The morning of the wedding arrived not with birdsong and joyful anticipation, but with the furious, insistent buzz of my apartment's intercom. It was 8 a.m. On a Saturday, I was sitting at my kitchen island wearing pajamas, sipping a cup of coffee, and reading the news on my tablet. The sound was jarring in the peaceful silence I had cultivated over the past few days. I pressed the talk button. Hello? Chloe. Open this door right now. It's us. My father's voice, tight with rage, crackled through the speaker. I'm not expecting anyone, I said calmly. Don't play games. We know you're in there. We need to talk to you. I sighed. I knew this was coming. It was better to face it and get it over with. I buzzed them in. A few moments later, there was a frantic pounding on my apartment door. Not a knock. A pound. Like they were trying to break it down. I took another slow sip of my coffee, set the mug down deliberately, and walked to the door. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my pajama shirt, and opened it. They stood there in the hallway. A 4-person firing squad. My father's face was red, a vein pulsing in his temple. My mother was beside him, her face pale and pinched, clutching her purse like a shield. Behind them stood Ethan, his eyes bloodshot and desperate. And next to him, the bride herself, Olivia. She was wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, her hair a mess, her face blotchy and swollen from crying. She looked nothing like the perfect, vibrant bride she wanted to be. She just looked like a mean, tired girl whose tantrum had finally met a brick wall. What do you think you're doing? My father snarled, pushing past me into my apartment. The others followed, storming into my living room like an invading army. I'm having coffee, I replied, closing the door softly behind them. What are you all doing here? Olivia was the one who exploded. Her voice was a shrill shriek that bounced off my clean white walls. What are we doing here? The vendors are refusing to work. The caterer won't answer my calls. The florist said, "Our order is canceled. You've ruined my wedding." My wedding, she screamed again, as if the volume would make it true. I walked past them, back to the kitchen, picked up my coffee mug, and leaned against the counter. I looked at them, this frantic, furious group of people who had taken up so much of my life, my energy, my money. And I felt a strange sense of detachment, like I was watching a scene from a movie. That's correct, I said, my voice even and quiet. I canceled all the contracts. Ethan stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. Why? Chloe, why would you do this to me? His voice was a broken whisper. To us? I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee, holding his gaze over the rim of the mug. You were told you don't fit the vibe. That it would be better if you just didn't come. I looked at him. His face crumpled. The silence in the room was deafening. He had no defense. He had no excuse. He had stood by and watched me be humiliated, then told me to be quiet about it. My mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. Chloe, this is your brother. This is his wedding day. You can't just destroy it over a few mean words. Olivia was stressed. You have to understand. I turned my gaze to her. For 30 years, I have understood, I said, my voice still quiet, but now with an edge of steel. I have understood that my role was to be quiet. I have understood that my job was to pay. I have understood that Ethan's happiness was more important than my feelings, my work, or my worth. I have been the bigger person my entire life. And what did it get me? It got me disinvited from the wedding I paid for. My father stepped forward. This is about money, then. You're holding the money over their heads. I never thought you could be so petty. No, Dad, I said, shaking my head. You have it wrong. This was never about the money. Not for me. For me, it was about belonging. But for you all, it was only ever about the money. And that was the truth. The raw, simple, undeniable truth. They weren't here because they missed me. They weren't here to apologize. They were here because the party was canceled. And they needed me to turn the money back on. Olivia, seeing that she was losing, let out a sob. A theatrical, calculated sound. She collapsed onto my sofa, burying her face in her hands. My dream wedding. It's all gone. Ethan rushed to her side, trying to comfort her, but his eyes were still on me, pleading. It didn't work. Not anymore. I was immune to their tears, their anger, their guilt. I had been vaccinated by years of their neglect. The showdown was over before it really began, because they had come to fight a ghost, the quiet, accommodating Chloe who didn't exist anymore. They all looked at me, waiting for me to crack, waiting for the old Chloe to emerge, the one who would sigh, absorb all the blame, and fix everything to make the noise stop. My father's jaw was set in a hard line. My mother was wringing her hands, tears welling in her eyes. Ethan was stroking Olivia's hair as she performed her dramatic sobs on my couch. They were playing their parts perfectly. A well-rehearsed family drama. But I refused to read my lines. I stayed leaning against my kitchen counter, a calm island in their storm of entitlement. The quiet in the room stretched, thick with their expectation. When I finally spoke, my voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the tension like a razor. You told me I don't belong, I said, looking directly at Olivia. Her sobbing hitched for a second. At the rehearsal dinner, you said I didn't fit the vibe. You said it would be better if I didn't come. You wanted me gone. I shifted my gaze to Ethan. You heard her. You did nothing. You told me not to make things hard for her. You chose her side without a moment's hesitation. Then I looked at my parents. And you both told me to be the bigger person, to let it go. You told me my feelings didn't matter as much as his perfect day. You all made it very clear where I stand. Or rather, where I don't stand. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. I let them remember their own words, their own actions. So, I agreed with you. I continued, my voice clear and steady. You're right. I don't belong. And I have decided that I am no longer willing to pay for a party I'm not welcome at. Olivia lifted her head, her face streaked with tears and fury. You did this to me. You destroyed my wedding on purpose. I shook my head slowly, a small, sad smile on my lips. No. Olivia, you have it all wrong. I didn't destroy your wedding. The wedding is still there. In theory, the guests are still invited. The church is probably still open. You and Ethan can still get married today. You have everything you need. Except for one thing. I let the silence hang for a beat. My money. I took a step forward, away from the safety of my counter. I felt strong, grounded. I didn't take anything away from you. I just stopped giving. I stopped funding an event where I was being treated with cruelty and disrespect. The flowers, the food, the music, the venue. None of that was yours. It was all mine until the final bill was paid. And I decided not to pay it. This isn't revenge. This is a consequence. The truth of it, the simple logic, seemed to finally penetrate their rage. Ethan stared at me, his mouth slightly open. The pleading look in his eyes was gone, replaced by a dawning, horrified understanding. He finally saw me, not as his sister, but as a separate person with a will of her own, a will he had never once considered. My mother let out a small gasp. Chloe, how could you be so cold? You think this is cold? I asked, my voice finally rising just a little. I'll tell you what's cold. Working 80-hour weeks to build a life for myself while my brother gets everything handed to him. That's cold. Paying off his debts while being told I'm not doing enough. That's cold. Pouring my heart, my time, and $75,000 into a wedding for a family that sees me as a walking checkbook and then tells me to get lost. That is the coldest thing I have ever known. Olivia collapsed again. This time for real. A genuine, shuddering sob of defeat. She knew it was over. The manipulation, the demands, the tears. None of it was working. Ethan just looked stunned, as if he was seeing the world in color for the very first time. And it was blinding him. He looked from Olivia to my parents, and then back to me. He saw the whole picture, the spoiled bride, the enabling parents, the brother who never had to stand on his own 2 feet, and the sister who had been holding them all up. My parents were silent. The realization was dawning on their faces. Too. The slow, terrible understanding that they had pushed the wrong child too far. They had sided with the golden child one too many times. And in doing so, they had broken the foundation that kept their comfortable world standing. They had taken the quiet, reliable one for granted. and they were about to find out just how much they relied on her. I walked to the door and opened it. "I think you should all leave now," I said, my voice soft again. "You have a lot of phone calls to make." They looked at me, defeated. There was nothing left to say. There were no more arguments to be made. I hadn't just won. I had revealed that there was never a game to begin with. There was only their delusion and my reality. And my reality had just canceled their party. One by one, they filed out of my apartment. A somber, silent procession. My father wouldn't look at me. My mother looked old and frail. Ethan paused at the door, his eyes filled with a desperate, unspoken question. But it was too late for questions. It was far too late for anything. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly, completely, blessedly alone. And it felt like peace. The silence in my apartment after they left was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was a silence filled not with loneliness, but with potential. It was the sound of a clean slate. I made myself another cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the city wake up. Somewhere across town, 150 guests were putting on their finest clothes for a wedding that no longer existed. I didn't have to imagine the chaos. I saw hints of it online later that day. A cousin posted on Facebook. "At the airport? Ready to fly in for Ethan and Olivia's wedding. So excited." A few hours later, her post was quietly deleted. A friend of Olivia's posted a picture of her wedding guest dress with the caption, "All dressed up and nowhere to go." Wedding got canceled. Followed by a string of confused emojis. The public humiliation must have been excruciating. Ethan and Olivia had to make those calls. They had to explain to every single guest that the grand, opulent wedding they had been bragging about for months was off. I can only imagine the excuses they tried to make. An issue with the venue. A family emergency. But the truth, as it often does, likely trickled out through the grapevine. The whispers would have been merciless. A week later, my mom called. I had unblocked her, curious to see what their next move would be. Her tone was completely different. The anger was gone, replaced by a weary, hollowed-out sadness. "They've rescheduled," she said, her voice flat. "For October. At the community hall." "That's nice," I said, my voice neutral. There was a long pause. "They had to take out a loan," she added, a hint of accusation in her voice. "Olivia's parents are helping a little, but it's going to be very small. I'm sure it will still be lovely," I said. I felt no satisfaction, no glee, just a distant, clinical sense of justice. This was the wedding they could afford. This was the wedding they had earned. "Chloe," she said, her voice cracking. "Your father and I, we're so sorry." It was the first apology I had received, but it felt thin, like a coat of paint over rotting wood. Sorry for what? Specifically, I asked. It was a clinical question, not a sarcastic one. I genuinely wanted to know what they thought they were apologizing for. For not listening to you, she stammered. For letting things get so out of hand. We always wanted to protect Ethan. You protected him from responsibility. I corrected her gently. You protected him from growing up. And you taught him that my feelings were disposable. That's what you need to be sorry for. She was quiet for a moment. Are you coming to the wedding in October? No, I said, without hesitation. I don't think that's a good idea. For anyone. I didn't need to go. My point had been made. My presence wasn't required. The next day, I went to my bank. The refunds from the vendors had started coming in. The deposits were lost, a $30,000 lesson in self-worth. But the rest of the money, nearly $45,000, was returned to my account. It sat there, a symbol of my reclaimed freedom. I went home, opened my laptop, and booked a flight. A first class. No expense spared. 3-week trip to Italy. I had always wanted to go, but I was always too busy working. Too busy saving money to fix one of my family's self-made emergencies. As I clicked confirm on the purchase, I laughed. A real, genuine laugh. Olivia had wanted a perfect, vibrant day. In the end, she got a canceled party in a rented hall. I, on the other hand, was about to get the Tuscan sun. Ancient Roman streets,